The massive crystal dome of the Galactic Council building stretched high above the assembled delegates, its walls humming with the nervous chatter of hundreds of different alien species. Ambassador Telvon stood at the central podium, his blue-scaled hands trembling slightly as he prepared to deliver what might be his people's final plea for help. The Zilani had always been known as peaceful traders and explorers throughout the galaxy. Their ships carried no weapons beyond basic defensive shields, and their colonies welcomed visitors from any world. But that gentle nature had become their downfall when the Devourers arrived from the dark space between stars. Telvin's voice carried across the chamber through universal translators, reaching every corner where alien diplomats sat in their environmental suits and breathing apparatus. Honorable Council members, the situation has become desperate beyond our worst projections. 3 more of our outer colonies fell to the Devourers just yesterday. Kepler 7, New Haven, and the mining station at Asteroid Belt Gamma are gone. A collective shudder ran through the assembly. Everyone had heard the reports about what happened when the Devourers struck. They didn't just destroy planets or kill populations like normal conquerors. They consumed everything organic, breaking down living tissue at the molecular level and rebuilding it into more of their twisted biomechanical ships. Entire worlds were left as lifeless rocks, stripped of every plant, every animal, every microbe. Our defense fleets have tried everything, Telvon continued, his translator struggling to convey the desperation in his voice. We deployed our most advanced shield generators, our fastest evacuation ships, even experimental weapons borrowed from the Corvan military. Nothing works. The Devourers adapt to every strategy within hours. They learn from each encounter and become stronger. The Corvan delegate, a tall insect-like being with 4 arms, clicked his mandibles nervously. His species had lent their best military technology to help the Zilani, but even their legendary war machines had proven useless against this new threat. The Devourers seemed to absorb not just organic matter, but information itself, growing smarter with each battle. Around the chamber, other delegates whispered among themselves in dozens of languages. The Altarian Empire had the strongest fleet in known space, but they were already discussing defensive positions around their own worlds rather than offensive action. The peaceful meditation worlds had begun mass evacuations of their outer settlements. Even the proud warrior clans of Rigel were talking about strategic withdrawals. If anyone at all, has the capability to assist us, Telvin's voice cracked with emotion, we are transmitting our complete tactical database and location coordinates. Our remaining fleet will support any allied action, regardless of the cost to ourselves. Most of the council members had stopped listening. They were already pulling up star charts on their personal devices, calculating how long it would take the Devourers to reach their own territories after finishing with Zilani space. Evacuation plans and defensive strategies filled their screens rather than rescue missions. That's when the unexpected transmission cut through every communication channel in the building. The signal came from the Sol system, a small yellow star on the outer edge of galactic civilization. Earth, the 3rd planet in that system, had achieved faster-than-light travel only 50 years ago, making them practically infants by galactic standards. Most council members barely remembered that the humans existed. They had sent a few trade delegations and scientific expeditions, but had remained mysteriously quiet in recent decades. This is Commander Jake Morrison of the Earth Defense Force. The voice was distinctly human, speaking in clear galactic standard with an odd accent that sounded almost relaxed. We've been monitoring your emergency broadcasts. Earth stands ready to provide military assistance to any civilization under attack by hostile forces. Please transmit detailed coordinates and all available tactical intelligence. The enormous chamber fell completely silent. Even the constant humming of life support systems seemed to fade as hundreds of alien minds tried to process what they had just heard. Earth? The death world that had somehow managed to stumble into space travel despite living on a planet that would kill most galactic species within minutes. Everyone knew the stories about Earth. It was a nightmare world of extreme weather, deadly radiation, toxic atmosphere levels, and gravity so intense that most aliens needed powered exoskeletons just to walk on its surface. The fact that anything had evolved there capable of achieving spaceflight was considered a minor miracle by xenobiologists. But military assistance? Against a threat that had defeated the galaxy's most advanced civilizations? Nervous laughter began to ripple through the assembly. The Altarian military attaché actually slapped his knee with one of his 6 appendages. The idea was absurd. Humans were primitive survivors who had barely figured out which end of a spaceship pointed forward. What could they possibly offer against an enemy that had outsmarted the greatest tactical minds in galactic history? But Ambassador Telvon wasn't laughing. His people were dying by the millions with each passing day. His homeworld would be consumed within weeks if nothing changed. Pride and diplomatic protocol meant nothing when faced with complete extinction. With steady hands that belied his desperate situation, Telvon quietly activated his transmission array and began uploading everything. Battle footage from the lost colonies, technical specifications of Devourer vessels, tactical analyses from failed defense attempts, and the exact coordinates of where the enemy would strike next. As the data stream completed, he whispered a prayer to the ancient Zalani spirits and waited to see what the mysterious humans would do with it. Kilvex had been working the sensor station aboard the Zalani command vessel for nearly 20 years, and he thought he had seen everything the galaxy had to offer. Massive trading convoys from the Rigel colonies, scientific expeditions with ships the size of small moons, even the legendary Altarian battle fleets that could darken entire star systems. But what appeared on his screens now made him question whether his equipment was malfunctioning. The first human ship emerged from hyperspace like a metal mountain materializing out of nothing. The vessel stretched nearly 2 kilometers from bow to stern, its dark hull covered in what looked like thousands of weapon ports. Energy readings spiked across his displays as the ship's power systems came online, showing output levels that shouldn't have been possible for something that size. "What in the 7 nebulas is that thing?" whispered his colleague at the neighboring station, a young Zalani named Porvex who had joined the fleet only months before the Devourer crisis began. Kilvex was about to answer when his proximity alarm started screaming. More ships were translating into normal space, emerging from hyperspace jumps with mechanical precision. Not just 1 or 2 additional vessels, but dozens, then hundreds. Each new arrival sent fresh waves of energy readings across his instruments. "Sir." Kilvex called out to Fleet Commander Halex, trying to keep the shock out of his voice. "I'm detecting multiple translation events throughout the system. The humans appear to be arriving in significant numbers." Commander Halex rushed over to the sensor station, his usually calm demeanor cracking as he saw the displays. What had started as curiosity about Earth's promised assistance was rapidly turning into something that defied explanation. The human vessels kept coming, wave after wave, until the entire outer edge of the Zalani home system was filled with foreign ships. But these weren't the small, crude vessels that most species had expected from the Deathworld primitives. Massive carrier ships deployed fighter wings that moved through space with deadly grace, their formations so precise they looked like flocks of mechanical birds. Support vessels that easily dwarfed most galactic capital ships took strategic positions throughout the system, their hulls bristling with equipment that Zalani sensors couldn't even identify. The largest ships were unlike anything in the galactic database. They were clearly designed for one purpose: warfare on a scale that most civilized species had never contemplated. Long, angular hulls covered in armor plating that seemed to absorb sensor scans rather than reflect them. Weapon systems that generated energy signatures powerful enough to crack moons. Point defense grids that could probably swat down entire fighter squadrons. "Commander," Porvex said in a voice barely above a whisper, "our computers are counting over 3,000 individual vessels. This isn't a rescue mission. This is an invasion force." The human fleet spread across space like a metallic constellation, each ship taking position with military precision that spoke of countless hours of training and coordination. Fighter patrols established perimeters around key positions. Sensor ships began active scanning of everything in the system. Mobile repair platforms moved into supporting positions behind the main battle line. The communications array suddenly crackled to life, and a human face appeared on the main viewing screen. Admiral Tom Bradley looked like he had stepped out of a military recruitment poster, despite the gray hair and weather-beaten features that spoke of decades in command. His gray eyes swept across the Zalani Bridge crew with the kind of professional assessment that made everyone stand a little straighter. Zalani Command, this is Admiral Bradley commanding Task Force Terra. His voice carried the calm authority of someone who had seen real combat, not just the theoretical engagements that most galactic species studied in military academies. We've reviewed your tactical reports on these devourer entities. Looks like you've got a real problem on your hands. Commander Halleck struggled to find appropriate words. The sheer scale of what had just arrived in his system was beyond anything he had imagined possible. When the humans had offered assistance, he had pictured perhaps a small squadron of primitive vessels, maybe a few dozen ships at most. What floated before them now was a war machine that could probably conquer half the galaxy if it chose to. Admiral Bradley, we expected perhaps a small squadron. This force appears to number in the thousands. Bradley's expression didn't change, as if deploying a fleet this size was the most natural thing in the world. Behind him on the transmission, Halleck could see the bridge of the human flagship, banks of tactical displays showing three-dimensional battle plans, officers moving with quiet efficiency, and weapons systems that hummed with barely contained power. Commander, when Earth responds to a distress call, we respond in force, Bradley said matter-of-factly. We've learned over the years that there's no point in doing a job halfway. You called for help against an enemy that's been eating planets. We brought enough firepower to solve that problem permanently. The Admiral leaned forward slightly, and his voice took on the tone of someone getting down to business. Now, we've studied your intelligence reports on these devourer ships. Interesting technology they have, adapting to different attack patterns. But adaptation takes time, and we don't plan on giving them much of that. Where do you need us to hit them? Around the Zalani Bridge, officers exchanged glances of amazement and growing hope. For months, they had been fighting a losing battle against an enemy that seemed unstoppable. Every strategy had failed, every weapon had proven useless, every tactical advantage had been turned against them within hours. But the humans had arrived not with desperate theories or experimental weapons, but with raw, overwhelming force. Thousands of warships that looked like they had been built for exactly this kind of fight. An admiral who talked about destroying planet-eating monsters like it was routine military business. For the first time since the Devourer crisis began, Commander Halleck felt something he had almost forgotten, the possibility that his people might actually survive this war. Captain Lisa Rodriguez had seen plenty of space battles during her 15 years in the Earth Defense Force, but watching the Devourer hive ship through her viewport still made her skin crawl. The massive biomechanical vessel looked like someone had crossed a warship with a giant insect, its hull pulsing with organic veins that carried unknown fluids between metal armor plates. Smaller ships sprouted from its sides like parasites, ready to break away and spread their infection to new targets. All stations, this is command, Rodriguez announced over the ship's intercom. We're beginning our attack run in 60 seconds. Remember, these things learn fast, so we're going to hit them with everything at once. No fancy maneuvers, no clever tactics they can adapt to. Just good old-fashioned human stubbornness. The bridge crew chuckled at that, but their faces remained focused on their instruments. Everyone knew this was different from their usual operations. The Devourers weren't just another hostile alien species with predictable weapons and strategies. These things consumed entire civilizations and grew stronger from each victory. Through the tactical display, Rodriguez watched as hundreds of human fighters launched from the carrier ship spread throughout the system. Unlike the elegant formations favored by most galactic militaries, the human fighters moved like a swarm of angry hornets, weaving unpredictable paths that would have been impossible for most alien pilots to follow. Their ships were smaller and more maneuverable than anything in the galactic database, built for pilots who had evolved on a high-gravity world where split-second reactions meant survival. Wolverine Squadron to all units, crackled the voice of Commander Pete Jackson over the comm, we're detecting heavy bioelectric fields around the target. Standard approach vectors are going to fry our electronics. Switching to attack pattern Delta 7. Rodriguez smiled grimly. Attack Pattern Delta 7 was something human pilots had developed for fighting in the radiation-soaked asteroid belts of their home system. Most alien species would have considered it suicide, but humans had been flying through deadly environments since they first left Earth's atmosphere. The first wave of fighters screamed past the Devourer's ship, releasing clouds of nuclear mines that detonated in carefully coordinated sequences. The explosions created overlapping fields of radiation that would have been instantly lethal to most organic life forms in the galaxy. But the human pilots flew straight through the radioactive inferno without hesitation, their ships protected by shielding technology that most aliens considered impossibly heavy and inefficient. "What are they doing?" gasped Jenth, the Zelani liaison officer assigned to Rodriguez's ship. His blue-scaled face had gone pale as he watched the tactical display show human fighters operating in radiation levels that registered off the scale. Those energy readings would kill any living being in seconds. Rodriguez glanced at the alien officer with amusement. "Jenth, you've got to understand something about humans. We evolved on a planet that's been trying to kill us since day one. Radiation, toxic atmospheres, extreme temperatures, crushing gravity, we've learned to work with all of it. What looks impossible to you is just Tuesday for us." The second wave of human fighters was already making their attack run, but these weren't carrying conventional weapons. They deployed something that made Jentha's translator struggle to find equivalent terms in his language: kinetic penetrators that used raw velocity and dense metals to punch through armor rather than energy weapons that could be deflected or adapted to. "All units, this is Reaper Squadron." Major David Kim's voice came through clear and calm despite the chaos of battle around him. "Beginning close quarters assault on target Alpha. Marines, prep for boarding action. We're going in through the main ventral breach." Jenth grabbed Rodriguez's arm with a trembling appendage, his eyes wide with disbelief as he stared at the tactical readouts. "Captain, the radiation levels around that vessel would kill any organic being within minutes. The atmospheric readings show pure toxins that would dissolve most known life forms. Your people can't possibly survive in there." His words were cut short as human assault shuttles launched from the nearest destroyer, accelerating toward the Devourer hive ship like bullets fired from a gun. The shuttles didn't bother with docking procedures or careful approaches. They simply punched through the alien vessel's hull using shaped charges and cutting beams, creating their own entry points with the kind of violent efficiency that made Jenth flinch. On the tactical display, life signs showed human marines spreading through the Devourer ship's interior corridors, fighting room by room through an atmosphere that registered as pure poison on Zelani sensors. The environmental readings were beyond anything most galactic species had ever encountered: acid levels that would eat through normal spacesuits, radiation that would cook unprotected flesh, and atmospheric pressure that would crush most aliens flat. But the human marines just kept advancing, their heavy combat armor apparently designed for exactly these kinds of conditions. They moved through the ship like they were taking a walk in the park, methodically clearing each section while placing explosive charges at key structural points. "Rodriguez here," the captain called to her communications officer. "Patch me through to Major Kim's squad." "Kim here," came the major's voice, slightly muffled by his helmet but still perfectly calm despite fighting inside what amounted to a floating biological nightmare. "We've secured the main bioprocessing center. These things are definitely organic tech hybrids, but their central nervous system is more conventional than we expected. Setting charges now." 20 minutes later, Major Kim's voice crackled over the comm again, this time with a slight breathless quality that suggested the mission had been more challenging than he was letting on. "Hive ship secured. Beginning demolition charges placement. All units clear the blast radius. This is going to be a big one." The human forces pulled back with the same mechanical precision they had shown during the attack. Fighters formed up in defensive screens while the capital ships moved to safe distances. The Devourer vessel, which had taken the combined Zelani fleet 6 hours to disable in their last encounter, simply ceased to exist in a brilliant flash of thermonuclear fire that lit up half the system. As the explosion faded, Rodriguez turned to look at Jenth, who was staring at the empty space where the enemy ship had been with an expression of complete shock. 47 minutes, she said quietly. From first contact to total destruction. Not bad for the first day on the job. General Mark Thompson sat back in his chair and took another sip of what the Zilani had proudly called their finest ceremonial beverage. To him, it tasted like someone had mixed fruit juice with motor oil, but he had learned long ago that diplomacy sometimes required drinking questionable liquids with a smile. Around the conference table, a dozen Zilani officers stared at him with expressions that ranged from curious to deeply concerned. The meeting room aboard the Zilani flagship was designed for their comfort, with soft blue lighting and furniture that accommodated their unique physiology. But Thompson had insisted on bringing his own coffee, and the simple ceramic mug looked oddly out of place among the crystalline drinking vessels preferred by his hosts. The contrast seemed to symbolize everything about this awkward first contact between their species. Fleet Commander Hallex shifted nervously in his specialized chair, clearly struggling with how to phrase his questions. The Zilani were naturally polite creatures, and directly challenging someone who had just saved their entire civilization went against every social instinct they possessed. But the demonstrations of human military capability had left them with questions that demanded answers. General Thompson, Hallex finally began, choosing his words carefully, please understand that we mean no disrespect. Your people have accomplished something that seemed impossible just days ago. But we must ask, your species has been spacefaring for barely 50 standard years. Most of our civilizations required centuries or millennia to develop the military technologies you displayed against the Devourers. How is this possible? Thompson chuckled and scratched his graying beard, a habit he had developed during his decades of military service. At 63, he had seen enough warfare to fill several lifetimes, but he had never imagined he would be sitting in an alien spaceship explaining human nature to bug-eyed creatures from across the galaxy. Well, Commander, I think there's been a fundamental misunderstanding about human history, he said, setting down his coffee cup with deliberate care. See, you folks have been assuming we're newcomers to warfare because we're new to space travel. But humans have been perfecting the art of killing each other for about 10,000 years, give or take a century. The Zilani officers exchanged glances around the table. Their translators were working overtime to process not just Thompson's words, but the casual way he delivered them. Most galactic civilizations spoke of warfare in clinical terms, as an unfortunate necessity that civilized beings sometimes had to contemplate. Thompson talked about it like discussing the weather. I don't think you understand, pressed Commander Velthan, a younger Zilani officer whose scales had turned slightly darker with agitation. We've studied your planet's history from your own broadcasts. Your species achieved nuclear capability less than a century ago. Faster-than-light travel only 50 years ago. Most civilizations require thousands of years to develop such technologies. Thompson nodded thoughtfully and activated the holographic display built into the conference table. The image that appeared showed Earth as seen from orbit, but it wasn't the blue marble that most species expected. Instead, the planet's surface was crisscrossed with the geometric patterns of cities, agricultural zones, and industrial complexes. More disturbing to the Zilani were the darker spots, areas where massive weapons had left permanent scars on the landscape. Every doctrine we use, every weapon system, every tactical approach you saw us deploy against the Devourers, all of it was originally developed for fighting other humans, Thompson explained, zooming the display to show specific regions. We build our military assuming the enemy is just as smart, just as ruthless, and just as creative as we are. Because for most of our history, that's exactly what we've been fighting. Colonel Rachel Williams leaned forward from her position across the table. She was younger than Thompson, probably in her early 40s, but her eyes held the same hardened look that came from years of combat experience. The thing is, we've never actually stopped preparing for war. That peaceful period you detected from our radio broadcasts over the last 50 years. We weren't becoming less militaristic. We were just getting ready for the real fight we knew was coming eventually. What do you mean, the real fight? Asked Hallex, though his tone suggested he was beginning to understand and didn't like the implications. Williams activated another section of the holographic display, showing technical specifications that made several Zilani officers physically recoil. Every human child learns basic military history in school. We study famous battles, successful strategies, the rise and fall of empires. Most of our entertainment involves conflict in some form. Our entire civilization is built around the assumption that someday, somewhere, someone is going to try to destroy us. Thompson picked up the explanation, his voice taking on the tone of a university professor giving a lecture. When we achieved spaceflight, we didn't see it as an opportunity for peaceful exploration. We saw it as the next battlefield. Every ship we built, every weapon we designed, every tactical manual we wrote, all of it assumed we would eventually meet hostile aliens who wanted to wipe us out. But the galaxy is mostly peaceful, protested Velthan, his scales now shifting to a pale yellow that indicated confusion among his species. Most civilizations resolve disputes through negotiation and trade agreements. Wars are rare and usually limited in scope. That's because most civilizations in this galaxy evolved on worlds that were relatively safe and stable, Williams replied. They developed philosophy, art, mathematics, and eventually technology in environments where cooperation was more valuable than competition. But Earth is different. Earth has been trying to kill every living thing on its surface for billions of years. Thompson brought up another set of images showing Earth's geological history, massive volcanic eruptions, asteroid impacts, ice ages that covered half the planet and storms that could level entire continents. Extreme weather that would destroy most alien settlements is just another Tuesday for us. Radiation levels that would kill your people in minutes barely register on our safety equipment. Toxic atmospheres, crushing gravity, temperature swings that range from boiling to freezing, we evolved to handle all of it. So when we finally made it to space and started listening to your communications, Williams continued, we heard about peaceful trading partnerships and diplomatic solutions to conflicts. But we also heard about things like the Devourers. And we realized that the galaxy was full of threats that your civilizations weren't prepared to handle. The room fell silent as the implications of what they were hearing began to sink in. The Zelani had always assumed that technological advancement naturally led to peaceful coexistence. The idea that an entire species might choose to remain militaristic even after achieving spaceflight was almost incomprehensible to them. How many of you are there? Hallex asked quietly, though his tone suggested he was afraid to hear the answer. Thompson and Williams exchanged a look that spoke of shared understanding built over years of working together. Earth has a population of about 12 billion, Thompson said casually. And every single one of them understands that the universe is a dangerous place that requires constant vigilance. The Zelani officers exchanged worried glances as the full scope of what they had unleashed began to dawn on them. These humans hadn't stumbled into space as primitive explorers looking for friends. They had methodically prepared to bring 10,000 years of military evolution to a galaxy that had never seen anything like them. Admiral Bradley stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the final cleanup operations through the massive viewport that dominated the command center. 3 weeks of systematic warfare had reduced the Devourer threat from a galaxy-ending nightmare to scattered debris floating through space. The biomechanical horrors that had consumed entire civilizations now existed only as expanding clouds of superheated plasma, their adaptive technologies finally meeting something they couldn't evolve fast enough to counter. The human fleet had worked with methodical efficiency that impressed even Bradley, despite his decades of military experience. Every Devourer nest had been located, surrounded, and eliminated using tactics that left no room for the enemy to adapt or escape. Nuclear bombardments followed by boarding actions, kinetic strikes combined with biological warfare agents, and coordinated assaults that hit multiple targets simultaneously. The aliens had tried to learn from each encounter, but humans had given them no time to implement their evolutionary changes. Admiral, we're receiving final reports from all task forces, announced Commander Janet Walsh from her position at the communications station. Sector 7 reports complete elimination of the primary hive cluster. Sector 12 has finished mopping up the smaller nests. Total enemy casualties are, well, sir, it's total. Bradley nodded with satisfaction. The operation had gone exactly according to plan, with minimal human losses and maximum strategic impact. But more importantly, it had served as a demonstration to the galaxy of what Earth could accomplish when properly motivated. Every major civilization had been watching through their long-range sensors, taking careful notes on human capabilities and tactics. The bridge's main communication array suddenly chimed with the distinctive tone that indicated a priority transmission from outside the local system. The holographic display activated, showing the image of Chancellor Vorthak, the current leader of the Galactic Council. The alien's expression was a fascinating mixture of gratitude and barely concealed terror, his 4 eyes blinking in the rapid pattern that indicated extreme nervousness among his species. Admiral Bradley, on behalf of the Galactic Council and all member civilizations, we extend our deepest appreciation for your species' assistance in eliminating the Devourer threat, Vorthak began, his translator working to convey the formal diplomatic language. Your actions have saved countless billions of lives and preserved civilizations that have existed for millennia. Bradley maintained his professional demeanor, though he could see the fear lurking behind the Chancellor's grateful words. The galaxy had called for help against an unstoppable enemy, and humans had responded by casually wiping that enemy from existence in less than a month. Now the same civilizations that had been desperate for rescue were wondering what they had unleashed. We would like to formally invite humanity to join our organization as a founding military partner, Vorthak continued, trying to keep his voice steady. Your species clearly possesses capabilities that could benefit all galactic civilizations. We could offer exclusive trading rights, access to advanced technologies, and membership in our highest governing councils. The offer was everything most spacefaring civilizations dreamed of, instant acceptance into the galaxy's most powerful political organization, with all the benefits and privileges that came with it. But Bradley had been expecting this moment since the first day of the operation, and Earth's response had been decided long before the human fleet ever left Sol system. Appreciate the offer, Chancellor, Bradley replied with polite formality, though his tone made it clear the conversation was effectively over. But Earth's leadership has decided we prefer to keep our options open for now. We'll be maintaining monitoring stations throughout this sector, just in case anyone else needs help with pest control. The casual way Bradley delivered that last line sent visible shivers through Vorthak's alien physiology. The implication was clear: humans would be watching, always ready to intervene when they deemed it necessary. But they would do so on their own terms, not as junior partners in someone else's political structure. Of course, Admiral, Vorthak managed to reply, though his 4 eyes were now blinking so rapidly they looked like strobe lights. Earth's independence is certainly understandable. We hope this marks the beginning of a long and mutually beneficial relationship between our peoples. As the transmission ended and Vorthak's image faded from the display, Bradley turned to survey his bridge crew. These men and women represented the finest military minds that Earth could produce, and they had just completed a campaign that would be studied in war colleges throughout the galaxy for generations to come. Captain Lisa Rodriguez approached from her station near the tactical displays, carrying a data tablet loaded with information that would have made most alien intelligence services weep with envy. Admiral, the intelligence teams have completed their final reports. We've got complete tactical assessments of every major galactic power, detailed analysis of their military technologies, comprehensive maps of strategic resources and defensive positions throughout known space. She paused to scroll through several screens of data before continuing. We've also identified the political fault lines between different civilizations, economic dependencies that could be exploited in future conflicts, and the locations of every major industrial facility capable of producing military hardware. Bradley accepted the tablet and quickly reviewed the summary pages. Everything was exactly as Earth's Strategic Planning Division had predicted. A galaxy full of peaceful civilizations that had grown soft over millennia of diplomacy and compromise. Advanced technologies that had been developed for exploration and trade rather than warfare. Military forces that were adequate for policing minor disputes but completely unprepared for real conflict. Excellent work, Captain, he said with genuine appreciation. Make sure copies of everything go to Earth Command through encrypted channels. I have a feeling this information is going to be very useful in the years ahead. As the human armada prepared to jump to hyperspace, Rodriguez couldn't help but smile grimly as Earth's standard operating procedure played out exactly as planned. Help the neighbors, make friends, gather intelligence, and quietly catalog everything that might be useful if those friends ever stopped being friendly. It was a strategy that had served human civilizations well for thousands of years, and there was no reason to change it now. The massive fleet began disappearing into hyperspace in carefully coordinated waves, leaving behind only the monitoring stations that Bradley had promised and a galaxy that would never again underestimate the quiet species from the Sol system. The galaxy had asked for Earth's help against the Devourers, and they had received exactly what they requested. But they had also received something they hadn't expected, the sobering realization that the most dangerous predators in the galaxy had been living quietly in Sol system all along, and they had just volunteered to be the neighborhood watch.